I've been asked to talk to you about telematics in general, but more specifically about the effects that the gender ruling, which comes into effect on December the 21st, could have on this emerging market. Okay, so talking about the merits of males and females driving ability is a tricky subject. But whilst this is a light-hearted introduction to the subject matter, there is no doubt that males and females are somewhat different, and their driving experience and skill set is not the same, and therefore rating them differently is, and was, right and proper. However, in March 2011, the European Court of Justice decided that this eminently sensible practice was to be outlawed, and so become one of the few things in history that can be blamed on the Belgians. So it has all changed from Christmas, and the natural impact is bound to be more expensive cover for females rather than less expensive cover for males, as their rate already reflects the greater risk they present. And indeed, who is to say that it will stop there? As early as next week, the UK Equality Act comes into being, and anyone who thinks that a challenge at some point on age is unlikely, I would suggest is being quite optimistic. In fact, the October edition of Which magazine carries a story on the poor treatment of the insurance industry for older drivers. Therefore, we will no longer be able to rate on gender when there is a clear reason and justification for doing so. And who knows, at some point in the future, the same for age. Interestingly, I'm yet to see any evidence of this being broken down by gender. I stood up in this same hotel at the ABI Motor Conference last November and said that in motor insurance we would all live in a telematic world in 15 years, and nothing has changed to make me change my view on that. We all know there's an easy solution to deal with the problem of young male drivers and the impact that their driving habits will start to have on the insurance premiums for females, as well as shortly and potentially all of us in the long term. There is, of course, another solution that is already taking hold and why we're here today. In the States, the placement of telematics and tracking devices has been grown extensively for a number of years. Brazil has responded to its young driver problem by insisting that all new cars have telematics devices fitted in this emerging global player. We all know about the foothold telematics has established in Italy, as you heard earlier. India and China are experiencing huge growth in private car ownership, and telematics is playing its part, though not really in the female sector. And we know from our experience at iGo4 that Australia and South Africa were early global adopters of this phenomenon, and we have used the experience of our South African partners to help develop our Wise Driving proposition aimed at both males and females. We'll hear around the market and today various figures and numbers around the current size of the market and its potential for growth. Though again, interestingly, I'm yet to see any real figures for gender. So whilst the current market in the UK is small, the main reason why telematics will establish itself is because it is right. It is right that individual driving behaviour is the basis of the premium that is paid and applies equally to all age groups and genders. That said, as with all emerging markets, the path to success will not be smooth, and particularly for females who are not adopting telematics as readily as males, other than for low mileage products. Aggregators have emerged in recent years as the dominant distribution channel, with at least 60% of all new motor insurance cases originating through a quote on a price comparison site. There is a higher percentage of male visitors to these sites, but that is only reflective of car ownership in the UK, which is male-led, and certainly females are as likely as males to use aggregators to source their cover. However, you all note a flattening of the graph this January, and that has continued through 2012. So where do we go from here? The majority of price comparison sites have recognised that telematics represents both a threat and an opportunity, with three strategies emerging, which is 1, ignore them and look to adopt a strategy if it really does take off. 2, create a separate listing or brand like GoCompare's Compare the Box. Or 3, and the most popular at this juncture, merely integrate into your existing solution. Indeed, Go Compare have a two-pronged attack, though plans for Compare the Box are for a gently does it beginning. I would suggest that a dive in headlong and just go for it strategy would be ill-advised as the telematics market wrestles with its future shape and direction. That said, for two providers to dismiss telematics at this point could also be described as a dangerous game, though understandable from a commercial viewpoint in the here and now. And indeed, the approach that aggregators adopt is a potential barrier to mass adoption for both sexes following the gender ruling. It has been in vogue recently for aggregators to move even deeper into measuring partner performance and indeed billing them based on a somewhat flawed click conversion metric. Until now, a solution for a participating brand would be to merely not quote for all males under 30 and see a 7% uplift overnight in click conversion, but with everyone losing, including the consumer. In the mass market, it will be interesting to see if this click conversion differential between the sexes continues post-December, with the potential for females to be faced with huge increased rating. The aggregator space is both crowded and competitive, and these successful organisations are going to have to demonstrate enormous patience if they are to succeed in this sector, as at this point, all of the metrics are far worse, and we have a continued educational challenge to face. Unless that challenge is faced and met, telematics risks remaining a niche, albeit a significant niche. Or actually, is this a tide that can't be turned back, and aggregators without a telematics strategy risk being shifted to the sidelines? Indeed, how dependent on the aggregators is telematics, when there is already evidence of some young drivers turning away from them in pursuit of cover? Everyone will have their own view on the value of social media, and I've been in the reluctant to embrace corner. But for this market, I think it has a huge role to play. And this is an area where a female focus would be of great benefit for providers, as they need convincing more than males of its various merits. The ability to interact with your consumer in a medium that they feel comfortable with is a huge plus. And you can't get away from the ability for providers to educate and address concerns for all consumers, but particularly for female drivers. At the moment, this market presents an opportunity for a paid search strategy that is targeted, and this, of course, can still be gender-specific. If you want to ensure more females than males, you merely adjust your attraction strategy accordingly. It also avoids the expensive and crowded common terms, particularly car insurance, where position one can command north of £30 a click. And you now have the Google comparison solution powered by Beat That Quote to contend with as well. And of course, there is the usual extensive range of areas in which an attraction strategy can be extended. However, as it stands, I would suggest that the aggregator space is the one to conquer. That said, we have already touched upon the need to bridge the knowledge gap, particularly for females, who are more reluctant than males to adopt telematics so far, as I mentioned earlier, other than for the low mileage propositions. This was a presentation that could have lasted 20 seconds. That there is enormous potential for further adoption of telematics following the gender ruling is fairly obvious. So this is my attempt to try and tell you something that you might not already know, which is the background of the word telematics that is starting to move into everyday language. It's adopted from Greek and was first used 34 years ago in a French magazine. So how is this word telematics spreading? The most notable aware piece has come recently from the specific educational advert from Confused.com. This is a bold step, though understandable, given Confused higher than average concentration of young male drivers, many of whom can be accommodated within the various Admiral brands. So now the word is gaining traction, what is it all about? The number of providers in the market is expanding rapidly. The original players tended to keep the proposition fairly simple and have all enjoyed the associated early adopter successes, particularly Insure the Box. But these have generally been aimed at and have been successful with young drivers, particularly males or the females with low mileage. What we are seeing now are the true behavioural-based solutions, as some of the large UK distributors dip their collective toes in the water. though early indications are that most were established as a solution to the issue of affordable cover for young drivers and not as a solution to the gender ruling. And as these products become more sophisticated, so other areas will continue to present challenges. The Big Brother issue is real and can't be ignored, but comes back to the educational piece, and with the help of social media, can be overcome, particularly with the message around the potential for significant savings. So a lot of data is being produced by these telematics boxes, but where does it go and who owns it? Does anyone really know the answer to this question? The issue of data is, and will continue to be, a recurring theme today and moving forward. And to what extent will each of these interested parties claim rights to the use, and indeed, what will the data really tell us about an individual's driving habits, ability, and most importantly, the propensity to have a costly fault claim? The common data set is, I know, a debate for later in the day, but is not a subject that can be ignored. The black box will tell us everything that we need to know about how hard someone brakes or accelerates, where and when they drive, and how quick. And each underwriter will start to form a view on the importance of each area and apply a rating accordingly, regardless of gender. Would it really be that difficult to then consolidate this into a DNA score based on maybe 6 or 7 crucial factors, and again, with gender irrelevant? Of course, there are things that a black box won't tell us. The identity of the driver and makeup of the passengers in the car are of paramount importance and can't be solved through the current telematic black box solutions. This is certainly something that Telematics 2.0 and the incorporation of mobile or standalone camera or sensor technology can resolve. Given the ease with which a DNA score should be able to be produced, will this enable customers to feel comfortable adopting a telematic solution, safe in the knowledge that they are not then locked into a single provider? I've spent the last few minutes demonstrating the challenges that the telematics industry faces for both males and females, but there is no doubt in my mind that they are outweighed by the positives. Justine Greening's recent move away from a role as Transport Secretary was something as a blow, given her enthusiastic support, and it remains to be seen whether her successor, Patrick McLaughlin, is also a believer, and his focus doesn't remain on the third runway at Heathrow or West Coast Railway line issues. The fact that all new cars will have a telematic device in the next few years means that we really are talking about when and not if on telematics, and that the upsides in public safety again mean that this is right and proper. But any provider out there, as Ben mentioned, not currently operating this arena, will have to realise that you can't just switch your operation across overnight and witness the same metrics as on conventional motor. At iGo4, we've already seen that telematics business is far more resource hungry. We saw earlier that click conversion is significantly lower. It would take you twice as many sales calls to get to a sale as you explain the intricacies of the installation and customer dashboard. You will take more calls through the lifetime of the policy. The calls will be longer, and particularly in the early months as queries continue around the customer's dashboard and driving experience. A barrier to early mass adoption will be of insurance providers' ability to overhaul their operations and to start to operate in a completely different manner. And indeed, what are you going to do with all of this data? So this really isn't an area where any brand should enter into lightly. And mass adoption faces further challenges. Even as hardware costs come down, the location of the box means that a great deal of the initial cost is and will remain in the required level of labour. One solution, and a kind of halfway house, is a self-install option. This will not enjoy the same level insurer buy-in as a fully installed box, and there are issues over location of the onboard diagnostic port and vehicle warranty, which means that this is only an opportunity for a limited part of the market. But that said, there is a market for this, albeit that this solution may appeal to males more than females. I mentioned earlier the issues over driver identity and passengers, and obviously the rapid improvement and advancement of smartphone technology will enable suppliers to address this. Amazing to think that the iPhone has actually been with us for 5 years now. So is telematics light the future of cost-effective mass adoption of the telematic concept? Some providers are already doing this as a means by which to introduce their current customers base to the idea. For me, this would be an ideal way in which to introduce your female customers to the gender ruling, by telling them that if they prove themselves to be better drivers, they will continue to enjoy better rating. Again, there are challenges, such as even further reduced underwriter buy-in. Though returning to my central theme on gender, this is an area where female buy-in may be higher than their male counterparts. Female smartphone ownership and usage is a fair way ahead of males. You will note the interaction with social media sites I mentioned earlier, and a higher propensity to carry out financial transactions. Is telematics light the key to female adoption? Unfortunately, the way in which telematics is generally promoted remains a young driver play. And to be fair to telematics providers, there is no doubt that this is where the greatest initial opportunity lay. And with the savings that could be made, it was always likely to ensure a strong foothold in this sector. The gender ruling presents a huge opportunity for females of all ages, though particularly young drivers. But as per my central point at the top here, it is not just young females, but those who genuinely drive fewer miles and don't just say that they do on an aggregator. The average mileage response on an aggregator is 6,000 miles a year, against the true average of closer to 11,000. However, it's not all good news, and not all females will be better drivers than males. Towers Watson recently told us that females are far harder to convince that telematics is in their best interests, though I suspect that the gender ruling introduction will go some way towards changing that. And the most obvious statement of my presentation, telematics will see the natural return of pseudo-rating by gender. So in summary, it really is when, not if, and aggregators particularly hold the key to that distribution question and pace of adoption. We should not beat ourselves up over common data sets whilst the market continues to evolve. But if telematics truly wants to become the solution of choice, it will have to come in eventually. And finally, and returning to the central theme, a strategy for the attraction of females specifically should be high up on the agendas of all telematics providers for the coming months. Thank you.